grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About with me, Alex Phillips. An opportunity for women to share highs, lows, gripes and groans and top tips for living. Keep me company in the ladies' room, and today is honorary fellow security expert Will Geddes. Here's what's coming up on the show. Omicron cases rise sharply in Scotland. We'll be crossing live as First Minister Nicola Sturgeon updates the nation at any moment. The Justice Secretary sets out a raft of measures to tackle violence against women. Well, my guest thinks it's high time we also talk about self-defence. That's what we need to talk about for the next hour, but what do you want to say? Email me, gbnews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me @gbnews. But first, it's time for the news headlines.
A very good afternoon. I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date at 2 o'clock. Coronavirus testing rules are going to be relaxed in England in an effort to reduce workplace shortages due to people isolating. The UK Health Security Agency says from the 11th of January, asymptomatic people who test positive for coronavirus on a lateral flow test won't have to wait then for confirmation on a PCR test before they begin their official self-isolation. The self-isolation time is 10 days, with people able to exit after a week if they test negative on 2 separate tests 24 hours apart taken on days 6 and 7. Well, one of those people isolating is the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer. He's missing today's Prime Minister's questions after testing positive for coronavirus. The Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, will stand opposite the Prime Minister instead at 3 p.m. today. We'll bring you that here on GB News. Sir Keir previously had to isolate after testing positive on the day of the budget last year in October. An ambulance service says it's still asking suspected stroke and heart attack patients to try and get lifts into hospital. The North East Ambulance Service brought in the measure as wait times, which are usually around 18 minutes, went up to an average of an hour. That's due to increased demand in the new year, combined with COVID-related staff shortages. Its medical director says it's still taking too long to get patients to hospital via ambulance, and where safe and possible, it's best for them to try and use other means. Nicola Sturgeon is just about to address the Scottish Parliament in the next few minutes. She could be announcing changes to COVID testing rules. Opposition parties in Scotland have called for the 10-day isolation period to be cut to 7 days if someone tests negative twice. Nicola Sturgeon is just about to start talking. As soon as she does, we'll bring that statement to you here on the channel. Now, in some other news this morning, the MP Stephen Timms says he would welcome the chance to meet the woman who stabbed him. The Labour MP for East Ham was attacked in 2010. His attacker is serving a life sentence for attempted murder. She's written to him to apologise. Well, Stephen Timms told Gloria De Piero on GB News that a face-to-face meet-up before she's released from jail would help with the restorative justice process.
She'd grown up in my constituency and spent her life there, and I would have liked to have met her then. The police at the time said they didn't think that was a good idea, so I didn't pursue it. But now that the opportunity perhaps has arisen again, I'd welcome that.
Well, as promised, let's go live to Holyrood, where Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister, has started speaking.
Is mourning a loved one. The surge of cases driven by the extremely infectious Omicron variant is continuing here in Scotland, across the UK and indeed in many other countries around the world. Here in Scotland over the past week, the total number of new reported cases has increased by 87%. Tomorrow's figures will almost certainly see us pass 1 million reported cases since the outset of the pandemic. However, the rapid and very widespread transmission of Omicron is such that the daily recorded tally of cases, which has always been an underestimate of the true level of infection, now gives us an even less comprehensive indicator of how prevalent the virus is. The weekly survey published by the Office of National Statistics gives a better indication. The week to 23rd December, it suggested that 1 in 40 people in Scotland had COVID. The results of the most recent ONS survey, published just a few minutes ago, suggest that in the week to 31st December, that had risen to 1 in 20. The proportion of people with COVID is, though, likely to be even higher than that now, a few days later, and I would anticipate that we will see continued growth in the level of infection as work and school resume after the holiday period. In short, COVID is significantly more widespread now than at any stage in the pandemic so far, and will almost certainly become even more so in the days to come. This, of course, has extremely serious implications for the NHS and social care, but it also has a severe and increasing impact on the economy and other critical services. This is primarily due to very high numbers of people off work with COVID, but it is, of course, compounded by the wider requirements for self-isolation. As I said last week, we have been considering very carefully the risks and benefits of changes to self-isolation requirements, and I will update on that shortly. More generally, as I said a moment ago, we are not proposing any new protective measures today. However, with the virus so prevalent, we do consider it's important to continue to apply some brake on transmission, particularly in settings posing the highest risk. Accordingly, I can confirm that the restrictions on large gatherings, the requirement for distancing between groups of people in public indoor places, and for table service in hospitality venues serving alcohol on the premises will remain in force for now, and indeed I expect until the 17th of January. In addition, while this is not a legal requirement, we are continuing to strongly advise the general public to limit contact with people in other households as far as possible, and to limit the number of households in any indoor gathering that does take place to a maximum of 3. After 2 long years of this pandemic, I know that asking people to cut all social interaction is just not feasible, and it would be damaging, of course, to mental health and well-being. However, limiting contacts insofar as we can and thinking carefully about the interactions that matter most to us is important just now. It helps to stem, at least to some extent, increases in transmission, and so it has a collective benefit, but it also helps protect us as individuals. When at least 1 in 20 of us have the virus, as is the case now, the risk of getting it when we mix with others is really significant. So if we limit the occasions on which we do mix, we also reduce our own risk of catching a virus that we know could have a nasty impact on our health. Trying to stem transmission, at least to some degree, is also important for the NHS, which is under increasing pressure. On the upside, the evidence that Omicron causes less severe illness than previous variants, at least amongst the under 60s, where the virus is most prevalent at the moment, does appear to be strengthening. Indeed, the fact that the numbers here in intensive care are so far remaining stable, while the numbers in hospital are rising quite sharply, may be indicative of this. We also know for certain that a booster jab provides strong protection against serious illness for people of all ages. However, notwithstanding the success of the booster programme and indeed the apparent lower rate of hospitalisation from Omicron, the sheer volume of people becoming infected means more people with COVID are being admitted to hospital. There is also remaining uncertainty about the impact on hospital admissions if Omicron continues to spread from younger age groups, where the risk of falling seriously ill from COVID has always been lower, to those in older age groups. As I reported last week, work is also underway to better understand the detail behind the headline hospital numbers. I can advise Parliament that the first results from analysis to differentiate those who are in hospital because of COVID from those in hospital with COVID but who were admitted for different reasons will be published on Friday. Work is also being done to assess whether the average length of hospital stay resulting from Omicron is any different to that associated with other variants. So in short, our understanding of the precise nature and extent of Omicron's impact on hospitals and the wider health and social care system is still developing. However, what is beyond doubt is that it is already having considerable impact. The number of people in hospital with COVID has increased from 679 to 1,223 in the past week. That's a rise of 80%, and that is putting significant additional pressure on the NHS. Indeed, the NHS is now facing increased pressure on three related fronts. First, from dealing with non-COVID backlogs built up over the course of the pandemic. Second, many NHS staff are absent and self-isolating, either because they have COVID or are close contacts of people with it. This means the increasing pressure on the NHS is being managed by a depleted and ever more exhausted workforce. And let me say, at this stage, we owe each and every one of them an enormous debt of gratitude. And third, as we keep saying, even with a lower rate of hospitalisation, the sheer volume of cases caused by the much greater transmissibility of Omicron is leading to more patients with COVID ending up in hospital. And with reference to the analysis to be published on Friday that I spoke about a moment ago, it's important to remember this. Even if COVID is not the primary reason for someone's admission to hospital, the fact they have COVID means enhanced infection control measures are necessary, and that further constrains the capacity of the NHS, so exacerbates that pressure. We continue to support health boards and staff to manage this pressure. This includes working with councils to reduce delayed discharge and targeting additional capacity where possible. Work is also underway, importantly, to develop alternative patient pathways for people with COVID, enabling them, where possible and appropriate, to remain at home with appropriate monitoring and advice rather than be admitted to hospital. And this work will also help identify at an earlier stage patients likely to benefit from new antiviral treatment. Of course, we can all help the NHS by taking steps to reduce transmission of the virus as much as possible. Presiding Officer, while abiding by current guidance and protections is at this stage vitally important, we do know that measures which restrict our lives are not sustainable indefinitely. And with a variant as infectious as Omicron, the kind of protections that are still possible within our financial resources and without causing greater harm in other ways, while still very important at this stage, won't control transmission to the same extent as these measures would have done with other less transmissible variants. So in light of this, coupled with the fact that unfortunately COVID won't suddenly disappear and that Omicron is unlikely to be the last new variant we encounter, we need to continue to adapt our thinking about how to manage the virus and become more resilient to it in future. Now, let me be clear at this stage, this does not, in my view, mean giving up on trying to control COVID completely. The impact of it on individual health and on our collective well-being is too significant for that. But it does mean seeking ways of doing so that are more proportionate, more sustainable and less restrictive. There are no easy answers here, but adapting to the ongoing challenge of COVID is inescapable. The Scottish Government is therefore currently working on and will publish over the next few weeks a revised strategic framework which will set out more fully how that process of adaptation can be managed with a view to building that greater resilience. We will seek views from across Parliament as we develop this new framework in more detail. However, the changes I am about to confirm to the requirements on self-isolation and testing are an early indication of an already adapting response. I said last week that it was important to consider carefully changes to self-isolation rules. We wanted to ensure that such changes are made only when, in the view of clinical advisors, the benefits of them outweigh the risk of them. I also want to make changes as far as possible in a coherent, not a piecemeal manner, given the importance of clear public understanding of what is required. As a result of this consideration, we are now proposing 2 changes to the self-isolation rules and 1 change to the requirement for PCR testing, and all of these changes will take effect from midnight tonight. The first change to self-isolation applies to those who test positive for COVID. While the initial advice when someone tests positive will still be to self-isolate for 10 days, there will now be an option to end isolation after 7 days, as long as you, firstly, have no fever, and secondly, you record 2 negative lateral flow tests, one no earlier than day 6 after testing positive, and another at least 24 hours after that. The second change applies to close contacts of positive cases, and this includes household contacts who are either under the age of 18 years 4 months or who are older than that and fully vaccinated. And let me be clear, by fully vaccinated, we mean first, second and booster or third doses. For close contacts in these categories, the requirement to self-isolate will end and be replaced by a requirement to take a lateral flow test every day for 7 days. Obviously, if one of these tests is positive, self-isolation will then be required. Anyone identified as a close contact who is over 18 years and 4 months and not fully vaccinated will still be asked to self-isolate for 10 days and to take a PCR test. These changes are significant and they are not completely without risk. However, at this stage of the pandemic, they do strike an appropriate balance between the continued importance of self-isolation in breaking chains of transmission and reducing the disruption self-isolation causes in the economy and other critical services. We're also proposing an important change to the advice on testing, and let me be clear again, this has been very carefully considered. Scotland, indeed the UK as a whole, has one of the most extensive PCR testing systems anywhere in the world. However, with infection levels as high as they are, we must fully utilise all available testing capacity, PCR and lateral flow, and make sure isolation and advice happens as quickly as possible. For those who have symptoms of COVID, the advice remains to book a PCR test, even if you have a positive lateral flow test. And of course, the advice to everyone is to test regularly with lateral flow devices, especially before meeting up with others. However, from tomorrow, if your lateral flow test is positive and you do not have symptoms, you will no longer be required to take a PCR test to confirm the result. Instead, you must immediately isolate and also report your result online so that Test and Protect can commence the contact tracing process and give you advice as quickly as possible. You'll also receive an online form that you must fill in, as would happen with a PCR positive, to ensure your contacts are notified. Other countries, Canada for example, have already made this change. It has been made possible because lateral flow tests are now widely available and work well. Also, and really importantly, the Test and Protect system in Scotland can start contact tracing on the strength of a reported positive lateral flow result as well as a PCR. And crucially, at times of very high levels of infection, the risk of a false positive lateral flow result is very low indeed, around just 3 in 10,000. So the safest thing to do at this stage is to treat a positive lateral flow test as confirmation of COVID, even if you have no symptoms. This allows us to maximise testing capacity and ensure a speedier start to the process of contact tracing and advice. Presiding Officer, there are a few further points I want to briefly touch on today. Firstly, the current situation continues to take its toll on everyone, of course, but it continues to take a toll on businesses. Last week I confirmed the allocation of more than 200 million of the £375 million in business support we are making available. Today I can confirm the allocation of a further £55 million. Up to £28 million will be allocated to taxi and private hire drivers and operators. £19 million will support services such as beauticians and hairdressers. £5 million will be provided for sport and an additional £3 million for tourism. Local authorities are, as we speak, working to get money to bank accounts as quickly as possible. Secondly, in light of the widespread community transmission of Omicron in the UK just now, discussions are taking place today between the 4 UK governments about possible changes to travel rules, including the requirement for pre-departure testing. If these discussions result in proposed changes, we will inform Parliament as quickly as possible. My third point relates to education and the start of the new term. All secondary school children are being asked to take a lateral flow test on the night before or morning of the first day back, and thereafter to test twice a week, and also in advance of mixing socially with people from other households. Likewise, university and college students should take a test immediately before travelling from home to term accommodation, and thereafter twice a week, and before socialising with people from other households. And staff in all educational and early year settings should take a lateral flow test just before starting back to work, and in line with broader advice after that. Our priority is to keep schools open and to minimise further disruption to education, but with community transmission high, I know the next few weeks will be challenging for pupils, staff and parents. Using lateral flow tests will help, so too will the changes to isolation rules, and updated education guidance reflecting these changes will issue shortly. We will also work with councils to ensure the guidance issued before Christmas is followed to keep schools not just open but as safe as possible. Presiding Officer, my final brief update today is on vaccination. I am immensely grateful to everyone involved in delivering vaccines and to everyone who has been vaccinated. By the bells and Hogmanay, around 3 million people, 77% of those eligible, had received their booster or third dose. If you weren't one of these people and you are eligible, please come forward now. You can arrange an appointment online or go to a drop-in clinic. There's plenty of capacity. You can get details at NHS Inform or your local health board's website. Getting a booster doesn't mean we won't get COVID, although it does reduce the chances of that, but it significantly enhances our protection against serious illness. It could quite literally save your life. 12 to 15-year-olds can also now go to drop-in centres to get the second dose. I encourage everyone in that age group to do so. If you're the parent or carer of someone in that age group, you can go with them to the vaccination centre. The vaccine programme has been an outstanding success, but there are still many people eligible but not yet vaccinated. If you are one of them, then for your own sake, and indeed for the sake of all of us, please rectify that. It is not too late, and no one will judge you for not having done it before now. On the contrary, you will be welcomed with open arms. Presiding Officer, this phase of the pandemic is possibly the most challenging we've faced so far. The most infectious variant so far is creating a volume of cases that, notwithstanding its possibly reduced severity, still has the potential to overwhelm us. And of course, 2 years in, the kind of measures that have helped us control transmission in past phases are becoming less tolerable and causing more harm. So while not easy, we do need to continually adapt our ways of managing this virus, and we will do so. But in the meantime, we must continue to do what we know makes a difference now. So get fully vaccinated as soon as you can. Please do it this week. The more of us who are boosted, the less severe the impact of Omicron will be for each of us as individuals if we get the virus, and for society as a whole. Second, limit your contacts. Right now, with infection levels at 1 in 20 at least, every interaction we have comes with a significant risk of catching the virus. So we should prioritise the contacts that matter most to us. Third, if you're meeting other people, test before you go every time. And finally, take all the other precautions which make a difference. Work from home whenever possible. As the new working year gets underway, I'm appealing again to employers to enable this. Wear a face covering on public transport, in shops, and when moving about in hospitality. Make sure it fully covers your mouth and nose. If you're meeting indoors, limit the number of households in your group to 3 at most, and keep windows open, and follow all advice on hygiene. I want again today, Presiding Officer, to record my thanks to everyone across the country who continues to do all of this and play their part in helping us through this latest very challenging phase of the pandemic. Thank you very much indeed, and I, of course, am happy now to take questions. Thank you. The First Minister will now take questions on the issues raised in her statement. I intend to allow around 55 minutes for questions, and I'd be grateful if members who wish to ask a question could please put an R in the chat function. And I call Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the changes to testing rules. These are sensible and proportionate changes that are similar to what we're seeing in other parts of the United Kingdom. I also welcome the changes...
You're watching We Need to Talk About on GB News, and that was Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon updating the nation on COVID restrictions in Scotland. The self-isolation period in Scotland, which had remained at 10 days, is to be reduced to 7 days, in line with England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Well, we're now joined by GB News Scotland reporter Davie Donaldson. Davie, bring us up to date.
Yeah, we heard there from the First Minister, obviously just over 16,000 new cases of Omicron, and then that's been an 87% rise this week, so you can understand restrictions remaining in place with regards to obviously the hospitality industry and things like that, which means obviously restricting numbers in to those places, up to 100 standing, 200 seated and 500, up to 500 for outdoor events, and inside obviously only 3 different households. So that remains in place, she says, to at least the 17th of January, so that's certainly not going to come as great news, but I think most people were probably expecting that. With regards to school, she said that obviously children going back to school tomorrow in Scotland want them to take a lateral flow test tonight and before they go to school tomorrow to try and reduce any spread of the Omicron virus there. So, and that's going to be difficult, you would think, for teachers to manage, and she's alluded to it there, Nicola Sturgeon, saying that she fully expects the numbers to go through the million barrier during the whole pandemic, so that's obviously not great news. But as children return to school and people return to work, that's inevitable, really, she said. So that's certainly something that's come out of today. With regards to obviously the isolation period, that was 10 days. It's down to 7 days now, as you said there, with having to take a lateral flow on the 6th and 7th day. Well, obviously, if that's positive, then you're back to isolating again. But I think it's more encouragement there to isolate at home rather than put more extra pressure on the NHS, as Nicola Sturgeon said, because that's really a breaking point at the moment, just in terms of the sheer numbers of people who have Omicron across Scotland, and not just that, the staff as well. So the staff are being affected as well, so that's putting even further pressure. But yeah, I mean, Nicola Sturgeon, it was not really earth-shattering. I don't think it was anything really that we weren't expecting. The big point that's come out of it really is children having to do this lateral flow, or advising them to do lateral flow tests, and obviously the reduction in the isolation period. It's hoped that that will make a huge difference.
Davie, thank you ever so much for getting us up to date. That's Davie Donaldson, our Scotland reporter. Well, we're delighted to now be joined by the spokesperson for the Scottish Hospitality Group, Stephen Montgomery. Stephen, what did you make of Nicola Sturgeon's announcement today? I mean, there must be some reprieve when it comes to staff shortages with that isolation period being cut from 10 days down to 7 days, but not good news because table service stays in place until at least the 17th of January, and there's still restriction on large events.
Good afternoon and Happy New Year to you. And I would welcome the reduction now eventually of the 10-day isolation down to 7 days. It would have been nice to have seen that before Hogmanay, whenever we asked for previously to allow us to bring more staff into work to allow us to facilitate the table service that you just referred to there. Because when you put these restrictions in, especially for table service in bars, etc., for vertical drinking, they've never had to have table service before. That requires extra staff. And for many people, that meant that they had to close over the Christmas and New Year period because they didn't have the staff.
How heartbreaking was it for you to see lots of potential customers over that Hogmanay period, over the Christmas period, in fact, going over Hadrian's Wall, essentially, to go and spend their Scottish pounds in the north of England?
Yeah, we certainly had that down here where I am in Dumfries and Galloway. If you take Gretna, for example, you're only a couple hundred yards and you're across the road, not even that, into your first pub in England. And the social media was awash over Hogmanay and New Year's Day of many of our English colleagues who are enjoying their tills ringing, their staff all happy, and their customers welcoming in 2022 in the way that we hoped we would have had it in Scotland.
I mean, you do also have Burns Night coming up on the 25th of January. Do you have hopes that perhaps you might actually be able to bring back more business then and some of the restrictions might be eased?
Well, this is the thing about, the forward planning, because we've just been on a government call this morning with officials and asking for them, for an exit strategy for what is going to be the tipping point, for this to allow restrictions to be relaxed, because we have got things like Burns Day, as you say, which is a traditional Scottish event, and also we have the Six Nations coming up now with the first match against England, I think, on the 5th of February. So we'd hate to see that actually having to be played in England instead of Scotland. So let's hope that we get the forward planning, we get the exit strategy, and by most of all, we get the funding out to the businesses that actually need it as soon as possible.
And how much are restrictions such as mandated table service impacting the hospitality sector? Is that acting as a deterrent for people because they'd rather be able to mingle and prop up the bar? Are you still seeing a fairly decent trade?
No, we're cut down. Probably some businesses are reporting 40% of a drop. Some businesses are reporting 65%. Some are reporting more. The table service is for many people effectively shut by default because they rely on the vertical drinking. So if they've only, say, a rural pub somewhere in Scotland who have only got maybe 4 or 5 tables, well, it's not financially viable for them to open. So it's having a devastating effect, and the support that's coming out needs to justify that. And the support for our staff, our staff are the backbone of every business. And, if you take it, now it's been reduced to 7 days, but whenever it was 10 days isolation, the average staff member on self-isolation, even if they're proven negative, was costing them about £700, £720 over that 10 days because of only getting sick pay. And some people were using their holidays up, which should never, ever be happen. The staff should not have to use their holidays to compensate for something that isn't their fault.
Thank you ever so much for joining us. And we wish you the best of luck in 2022. It's been a difficult couple of years for the hospitality sector, and we do hope that you can fully reopen and get business up and running to maximum capacity once again. That's Stephen Montgomery there, who is spokesperson on behalf of the Scottish Hospitality Group. Well, time now for a short break. We'll be back with you in just a moment.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back to We Need to Talk About, and let's crack on, shall we? The Justice Secretary, Dominic Raab, has written in The Telegraph today that he will put the fear of God into abusers after 2021 revealed a horrific spate of violent attacks, sex assaults and murders of women. He's promised that victims of domestic violence would no longer be denied justice if they fail to report an assault within 6 months. He said he'd introduced longer sentences for sex crimes, a nationwide rollout of pre-recorded evidence in rape cases, league tables for rape prosecution rates, and the police focus on the lives of the perpetrators, not the victims, when it comes to allegations of sexual assault. All very well, I say, but from the party that once said they would be tough on crime and tough on the causes of crime, the situation tragically remains that, in his own words, for many, the fear of being out alone after dark or that they may be beaten in their own home is a grim reality. Today, don't we just know it? In a moment, we're going to be speaking to security expert Lisa Bascott, and here to talk about how women can try to protect themselves in real life is James Bond cum bodyguard Will Geddes. Will, you really need to talk about self-defence, right?
Well, I think it's unfortunately something that we all have to consider. I mean, whether it be women, whether it be men, whether it be children, I think unfortunately we live in increasingly violent times. And I know that in the wake of the Sarah Everard incident, which was particularly horrific, bearing in mind, obviously, the perpetrator was within a position of authority that we would hopefully be able to trust, that a lot of people were very sort of inclined to say, well, why do we feel we need to learn personal protection? Why should we feel obligated? You know, surely it should be a safer environment. Now, unfortunately, violence has always prevailed through all the years of time. And it's something that can help preserve us and protect us on a day-to-day basis. Now, I've taught physical personal protection for many, many years, but I'm always a stalwart about that early preventative measure, that early recognition, that avoidance, that awareness of identifying the threat, being sensible, being responsible, and having operated in so many hostile environments around the world, you know, legs and running away from a situation can often be your best option. But there's a lot more to it about understanding the environments that we live in and that we socialise in and recognising where the threats are and trusting what I would always say fundamentally is our gut instinct that if we feel something's wrong, act on it.
So if a woman was walking home late at night by herself, had a feeling that she was being followed or she was actually being followed, or say even she is accosted, what sort of advice are you giving to women out there? OK,
well, I mean, we don't have that much time, Alex, today, and obviously I could do an awful lot on this in terms of the various advices. But first and foremost is looking at your route. How are you getting home? Are you going to be walking? Where are you walking through? What sort of environments you're walking through? And if they are unavoidable, and sometimes they are, you will have to be on foot. Then what precautions are you taking to ensure that you're reducing the threat? Because one of the things that we know statistically is a criminal will always look for the path of least resistance. They'll look for the easy target. They're not going to go for someone that they perceive to be a difficulty, someone who's going to fight back, someone who's going to be a challenge for them. Because criminals don't want to get caught and they don't want to get hurt. So it's about mapping your route and then looking at what you can have with you that you can ultimately use. And there's a lot of misinformation about having your car keys in your hand. The practicalities of doing something like that doesn't work. I've been doing a series of what I call everyday carries, things legally you can carry on your person, which are non-lethal, but sufficiently equipping you to be able to protect yourself should things come to blows. But ultimately, you want to try and avoid it beforehand. So it's much like when you're driving. Look at the furthest point down the road. And if you can see the hazards before you come to it, then you can take evasive action. You're always going to be in a safer place.
Well, thank you. We are also joined now by Lisa Bascott, who's founder of Second Line of Defence, the UK's first female-focused recruitment agency in the private sector. Lisa, do you think more women should be learning self-defence skills?
Absolutely. I think that in the light of so many things that have happened this year in particular, it's more and more important for women to be more responsible for themselves, as it were, and taking preemptive action in terms of looking after their safety and well-being wherever they go and at whatever time of the day or night it may be.
Do you think it's high time that, you know, women took up things like martial arts even to give them at least a few sort of defensive moves that may help them in a situation if someone did indeed physically accost them?
I think the idea that women haven't been interested in self-defence for quite some time is a bit of a misnomer. I think women have been doing that maybe for possibly different reasons, but I think maybe we're reporting it more so now, but it's definitely something that we've always been acutely aware of and interested in.
I'll bring Will back into this conversation. I mean, Will, would you say if someone did accost you, say you're a woman and it's a man, it doesn't have to be that particular combination, of course it can happen in any sort of iteration, that physical response is a good idea, or would you say actually no, the best idea is to try and get out and don't try and retaliate?
Well, I mean, I agree with everything that Lisa said, and we're both very much, I'd like to hope, on the same, song sheet. I think in terms of, obviously, when it comes to a robbery, and I'd advise the same to a man as I would to a woman, you just hand your stuff over. It's just not worth it. To have a life-changing injury sustained, obviously, as a result of protecting your handbag or your watch or your briefcase is really a pointless exercise. That's what insurance is for, and your family would pay far in excess to ensure that you never sustained any injury in that process. But when it comes to life-threatening, if it's a sexual assault, it's an attempted rape, or it's a violent assault against you, absolutely, you take all the gloves off and you basically get stuck in. But it's going to be using dynamic measures. And, going to self-defense is great as long as it's a proven system and it is not looking at something which is necessarily sport-based. There are many, many clients that I've had who've studied Taekwondo, studied Jiu-Jitsu, which I think is a great technique because fundamentally, if the threat gets taken to the floor or you get taken to the floor, you need to be able to control that situation and dominate that situation where you possibly can. But really, fighting is your last option. It should be your backup. First and foremost, it should be about awareness and avoidance.
Yeah, I mean, Lisa, in that respect, if you were advising females on how to go about avoiding any sort of danger, which of course is, impossible to avoid completely, but what would be your top tips?
Again, just depending on what situation you're in, if we're just talking about your average night out, it's about, if you're out with a group of friends, be they girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever, that you make sure that, as a group, you're looking out for one another, that you're always aware of where you are. Always make sure that you know how you're going to get home. Is your mobile phone still working? Can you call that Uber? And if you can't, are you going to be in a position to have a good conversation with the door security staff so that they can help you? It's about pre-planning. It's about being sensible, really, and all the obvious things that seem obvious now but may not at the time when maybe you've had one or two extra drinks that you shouldn't have, might be the thing that saves you in a particular situation.
Yeah, Lisa, what is your position on the fact that, should the onus be on women to have to avoid potentially dangerous or perilous situations, or have to plan their lives essentially around making sure they don't put themselves into positions of vulnerability? I mean, surely more needs to be done to prevent these attacks from happening in the first place.
Agreed. I mean, we can't do anything about people who want to harm, in particular, women. But as a woman, responsibility for me when I'm out and about is on me. I speak for myself. I can't speak for every woman. So I think it's a double-edged sword. I think we as women, we need to be more responsible, more self-aware, and unfortunately more precautionary at times. But also the authorities need to obviously do a lot more about helping prevent.
Yeah, it looks like we've lost that line a little bit, but that's Lisa Bancroft there describing best ways that women can protect themselves. And believe me, there is power in making sensible decisions for yourself. That's Lisa Bancroft, of course, second line of defence, the founder of that, which specialises in female security. Well, now it's time for a new section of the show where we doff our fascinators to the imagined matriarchy as we go about building our very own Womanifesto. All my guests get to nominate 3 policies they think would make the world a better place. And as High Empress of the show, I decide if they make the cut. So, Will, you're running the world for today. What is your very first policy to help out women?
Firstly, God help us if I was running the world, but I would try and make it a better place where I could. Alex, I think, there are a number of key areas which I think we in society have to address. There's become this incredible wokeness, and you and I know each other reasonably well, and you know that I'm not very woke, for starters. But I think fundamentally we need to claw back to our originalities and to our core values. And I think the first of which is the access to pornography, particularly for younger people. And I'm not opposed to pornography, and I think, if you're a consenting adult with your own responsibilities, yeah, of course, you should be able to access this content, and we're never going to eradicate it. It's always going to be available. However, the concern is the impact it's having on the young. and the accessibility that they have to it. And I hear the most horrific stories about kids who are sort of in their early tweens, even as young as 9 or 8, who are accessing stuff. And this is shaping their opinions, and this draws into this bigger picture about safety and respect towards women, the fact that pornography is deteriorating and decaying that respect. And I think ultimately this should be a niche area which fits into a particular corridor that some people want to go down, but I think it can't prevail as a socialised norm. And
I completely agree. It's a topic that I am hugely interested in. I mean, I would go as far as saying the industry should be regulated. We don't let under 18s buy alcohol. I get ID'd for alcohol and I'm almost 40. We regulate gambling, for instance, in an industry that has potentially such a huge social harm. Spiralling out of control. That's definitely in the Womanifesto. I'd annex it with a lot of stuff as well. OK, number 2.
OK, number 2, I think it's greater education. And again, this all is going to be conjoined. I think it's the education of the young to understanding that respect for each other. We've looked at this kind of niche respect or respect for niche communities, particularly in the last couple of years, within this sort of wokery that has kind of been, imposed upon us. And I say imposed, I do feel that it has been imposed. But I think there has to be a generality in terms of respect for the individual, respect for others, and I think especially respect for women. And bearing in mind, obviously, the subject matter of your particular show, Alex, I think it's really important that men, and I'm really, really very honoured to be invited today to be able to speak on behalf of maybe some of the male community, to say that there is a deterioration in terms of respect for women, which has been drawn in from social media, it's from public perceptions, social expectations, which ultimately is really a responsibility for the parents. And I think the parents need to wake up to the responsibility. If they're bringing children into this world, they need to establish those good values. And for those children to understand, to assimilate, particularly young boys, to assimilate that their disrespect to women in the community is no different to some stranger being disrespectful to a woman within their family, whether it be a sister, a mother, or a grandmother.
It's a very, very good point, and I wholeheartedly agree. We love it. Big tick. OK, number 3.
Excellent.
Doing well so far in the ladies' locker room.
Doing all right so
We might
far.
let you stay.
Well, my last one is online harassment. Now, I wrote a book a couple of years ago, which was a guidance for parents in how to keep their kids safe online. And online harassment is horrific. And during certainly the lockdown periods, I had calls from very many friends of mine whose children were stuck at home, living their lives because they couldn't outside on their platforms, on their digital platforms and so on social media. And you know what? If I post something on Instagram that says anything about COVID, I am going to get a warning sign, which is going to pop up right at the very bottom, which is going to say, do fact check this against COVID, relative materials. Why are we not having those impositions, those controls? They've got the algorithms, they've got the technology to put these onto social media platforms, that as soon as some sort of obscene content gets posted or something malicious gets posted, there are some filters in place. Now, I'm not saying that adults can't necessarily see those comments, those reactions, those responses, but I think for children especially, and particularly where there's harassment going on, because whereas back in my day, and I am a lot older than you, Alex, but I could leave school. If I was being bullied at school, I could get home, get into the sanctuary of my home and not feel that I could escape it until at least the next day. Social media, kids' access to digital platforms means they can be harassed 24 hours a day. But equally, we as adults can also be harassed 24 hours a day, as we have to find social media platforms essential to our day-to-day business and living.
Love it. Totally agree. And I'm sure the whistleblower Francis Horgan from Facebook would too. Very good policies there. Well, you have also been giving us your views about women protecting themselves with self-defence. Here are a sample. Gary says, you cannot carry anything for self-defence with the sole intention of using it for such. It would be an offence weapon. Probably a good point there, Gary. Philip says, please don't forget that men get attacked too. We all need to know how to protect ourselves. That's true. Actually, men do tend to be the greatest victims of violent crime and the perpetrators thereof. But there is usually a big physical disparity, can I just say, between men and women. Eric says women should be allowed to carry pepper spray on them at all times. Interesting point to raise. It is, of course, illegal in the UK and something I've been wondering about whether it's time that be legalised. Well, we've been asking over the last few days what women want. It's an enigma that has befuddled men since the Garden of Eden. So here on We Need to Talk About, we're going to try and find out. Are wolf whistles offensive? Is holding the door open cringe? And do we really want to split the bill? Well, let's get the same, but from a man's perspective, because it's time for the daily trigger warning. Will, I know you've got a very particular subjects you want to talk about?
Chivalry, Alex.
Come on, then.
Chivalry.
Are you get rid of that? It's old-fashioned.
No. We need to pull this back out of the bin. Unfortunately, I feel that chivalry has been diluted. I think we as men, in many regards, are not able to demonstrate that. And I think, again, to a kinder, nicer, more respectful society, I think men have to realise that walking on the outside of a woman down the pavement, OK, back in Victorian ages, that would be to stop the carriages splashing the water onto our female companion, but opening doors for women. And I hear all this nonsense from various guys who say, yes, but, you know, I don't get any thank yous or I get given a dirty look when I do it. I don't care. I will continue to do it.
Would you give up your seat on the tube to a woman?
Absolutely,
Things like that?
and I do regularly.
Bill splitting?
Bill splitting. You know, I'm a bit of I'll pay the bill, but you know what? It's never a bad thing if a woman will offer to pay for the bill or to contribute towards the bill. But I can be, and there are going to be a lot of haters out there on the male community to me for saying that.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think it is that chivalry has died? Because men always say, oh, it's feminist. You brought this on yourself. You wanted too much. You didn't like us doing those things. I don't know any woman who hates having the door.
It's nonsense. Every strong woman I know loves some chivalry. They want their man to be an alpha. And I think it's important for us men to realise that we do need to go out, hunt and gather and kill our prey and supply and provide for our families.
Maybe not all women, but I'm certainly one. And we appreciate this alpha male joining us in the ladies' locker room today. Will, it's been an utter pleasure and a privilege. You, of course, have been watching We Need to Talk About. And wasn't it great to get a man in Feminist Corner? See, we're not all misandrists here in GB News, in my little section anyway. Do join me again at the same time tomorrow. Coming up next, of course, it's Prime Minister's Questions on The Briefing with Darren McCaffrey. But first of all, here's time for the weather forecast.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. A bright and breezy winter's day out there. Many places seeing blue sky and plenty of sunshine. It is cold. It's going to get frosty tonight. And so although the winds are easing, it is still pretty blustery across the east. The isobars close together there through the North Sea. So a cold wind blowing on those North Sea coasts. But elsewhere, the winds certainly easing off through the day, lighter than yesterday, and many places fine and sunny. Now, there are some showers across Wales and Northern Ireland. We'll keep one or two scattered showers here today and across the far northeast of Scotland as well. Maybe the odd one grazing the east coast of England, later into parts of Norfolk. And it does feel cold across eastern England. Temperature only 4 or 5 degrees. Add on that wind, it feels colder than that. But elsewhere, temperatures 5, 6 Celsius in the sunshine. As I say, the winds for most are quite a bit lighter than yesterday. Now, as the winds ease off this evening and overnight, the frost will take hold rapidly. It's going to be a really cold night tonight. And later in the night across the south, we could also see some dense freezing fog patches. Temperatures, even in towns and cities, below freezing. Rural areas well below minus double digits, where there's snow lying on the ground, possibly over northern England and Scotland. Turns slowly milder tomorrow morning as wet weather comes into Northern Ireland. That will bring some snow for a time over the hills, and then as the wet weather hits the colder air across Wales, again some snow for Snowdonia, and then northern England, parts of Scotland. Some of the higher routes here for a time tomorrow, not very pleasant, with snow falling and the winds picking up as well. A cold air across the east, turning milder in the southwest, but the colder air pushes back in as the wet weather sweeps away, and that allows the showers later tomorrow to turn back to snow across Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, and then through Thursday night across northwest England and North Wales too. And again, things likely to turn icy. So we do have warnings in place, yellow warnings from the Met Office. Next couple of days for snow and ice. See the Met Office website for details of those weather warnings.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farrar, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Well, over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
A very good afternoon and welcome to the Briefing PM, your fix of all the latest political news.